Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously we're picking up with the Grant and Ace situation. I thought was really interesting. Obviously, the whole conversation of why I didn't see anything before now. Grant's like, I tried to talk to you on multiple occasions. He's like, I had to try to find out if you were a psycho, and then work on us being great friends type of situation. I thought that was so interesting. And we get a montage of him trying to talk to Ace, but it's just every time he tries to, the conversation, for him it's just I don't think we had any common ground, and Ace is like, no, come on, we'll figure this out, and periodically throughout the episode, he's giving him these choices and stuff like that. It's like, oh, are you into this? You're into this? Trying to figure out, even one of them being Star Trek versus Star Wars. It's like, why can't, it's like later on, it's like, oh, why not? Why can't it be both? It's like, come on, man, I'm just, that's not the point of the game. Also, I'm just trying to find out what your favorite color is, type of thing, But it turns out Grant's mom is being threatened by a dude named Daniel West. Obviously, this hits, this whole entire situation hits Grant pretty hard because for him, his entire life is upheavaled. Because everything he knew was a lie. I even love the whole thing of the reason why he's like, I'm confiding in you now, Ace, because I need your help. And he's like, because you heard I'm the hero of Horseshoe Bay, because you can convince Nancy Drew to help. He's like, that was my second guess. But obviously Nancy, amongst anyone, can understand. She's like, yeah, it's going to be hard for a while, but eventually you will kind of find a way to, everything will be okay. Which is interesting for her to say, considering yeah, she's dealing with it okay, but still she's suffering the ramifications of these new truths coming to light. So I just think that's such an interesting aspect. But the crux of this is that Daniel wanted something that Susie, Grant's mom, had hidden away, and what we never, at first it's well, what is it that she stole that he thinks is so valuable? And luckily Nancy knew exactly where it was hidden, because she was like, oh yeah, it was a farm cult or something she dealt with when she was in the 10th grade. So once again, just little peeks here and there about some of her earlier cases and stuff like that, which led to them going to going inside what was essentially a mine, and they ended up finding it. Sadly, the mine shaft that collapsed. Luckily, they had the equipment needed to at least alleviate some of the rubble, or keep the pillars from completely collapsing while everyone ended up getting through. The moment Grant had given Nancy the device and tell her to go first, I was like, he's probably going to get stuck on the other side. I didn't think oh, he's going to die or anything like that, but I thought he'd be kind of stuck on his own. But luckily, Ace is trust me, I'm your brother, and was able to pull him through before everything came caving down. But they ultimately ended up figuring out the password because Ace had to, confront his dad about it. Because Grant and Ace had run into his dad earlier. And, I like that moment. Even though they're just having these small moments this episode, it is kind of, Grant and Ace, but it is nice to kind of see that brotherly bond already being created, And, I thought it was interesting, because for Grant, it's should I tell, Tom the truth that I'm his son, and he's kind of he's wondering if he should, and Ace is do you want to? And for Grant, he doesn't know, because for him, he had said for so long he thought oh, my dad just was a bad guy, he just up and left my mom. But it's well, he was a U.S. Marshal, she was in witness protection, that's a big no. And so also the thought was she most likely didn't find out she was pregnant until they went their separate ways, until she got put relocated, and he's never known this entire time. So I figured it was going to be a situation that he didn't know about Grant. And but later on they end up getting the password for him, because it turns out the password is the date that was the last time they spent it together. It was interesting because it's the song was the hint to the password was a connected to a Lauryn Hill lyric or whatever, but they ended up finding out that it's a list of all the witnesses, because it was interesting because luckily Carson was able to get some of the info from the case, because we ended up finding out it was a RICO case, that this insurance company was up to some shady stuff, and it turns out one of those people was Daniel. He was actually a witness too. He was someone that did a lot of dirty work for the company, and that is the thing of why would you were a witness as well, like, why would you try and, like, do all this? But ultimately, like, he ends up taking Ace, and, you know, it's like, I want that list, or, you know, Ace is going to die, and obviously Nancy and Grant couldn't have that. I mean, for Grant, it's like his mom was already a potential target, so I can't let this happen. But it turns out he's part of some larger Illuminati group that's connected. Like, this Holt group was just a front for something even deeper and darker. I was almost halfway expecting it to be revealed, and this still could be a possibility, that the Hudsons are connected to this Illuminati group. They're powerful enough and vicious enough for that to be a possibility. So I think those storylines will potentially converge, like the road back and stuff like that. So I think that's interesting. But for him, it's like he's doing all this because, for one, he went from being a high-paid hitman and stuff to essentially like working a mundane job, and he wants his special privileges. He wants that high life again. He wants to impress the road back, so they will take him back. He'll be in their good graces. They'll owe me, so I can have not only like my old life back, but even more so. You know, I think he's thinking like he'll get rewarded. So Nancy, even though Ace is like, don't hand it over, I don't want to be responsible for so many people dying, but Nancy hands it over, and Ace is like, you gave him a list, and it's like, well, I made a deal with Celia, so, and it's like, you believe her? Because she was like, I'm asked her not to do this in a very bloody way, and it's like, you believed her? And it's like, and Nancy says, I couldn't lose you, and I thought that was so interesting, because I think that's flowing in line with what I kind of thought. Like, I've said it before, like, I always thought Ace and Nancy would get together. It seemed like that budding relationship was kind of there, and this might be the road to that. I mean, it might just be also because, like, well, she recently lost George, and obviously everything happened, so it's like, she's probably very protective of everyone, but I think even more so. But it's going to get complicated considering, like, oh, they're kind of both already dating someone, so I'm sure that's going to get, you know, Gil and Amanda, so I think any budding thing between Nancy and Ace probably would be complicated. Like I said, if it even goes down there, but it's just like that look. I mean, it might just be like a thing of Ace feeling bad, that it's like, you know, Ace feeling like, damn, like because of me wanting to protect me, you ended up crossing the line, having to make a deal with Celia, and, you know, Nancy probably feeling bad, like, I compromised myself, but you guys are too important to me, and I would do whatever it takes to protect you. I think, you know, because she also probably feels responsible that so much happens that they ended up getting. To be fair, this was Ace's and Grant's situation, but for her, I think it's like, I always end up dragging you guys into stuff, and you're there for me. So, like I said, I'm leaning more towards there being kind of like a romantic thing going on, but it could just easily stay like a very platonic thing. You're my friend, and I care about you thing. We'll see. But that deal she ended up having to make with Celia, you know, Celia wants her to change her statement, because it's like, right, your testimony is the crux of the DA's case against Everett, and it's like, time and time again, Nancy was like, I'm not going to do that, because for her, it's like, not only will it crush and destroy my credibility, it's also like, your husband's done a lot of terrible stuff, like, why would I let him get away with it? But Cecilia is suggesting, like, hey, you do this, you'll be in Everett's good graces, and you do this time and time again, keep proving your loyalty. When the time comes that he ultimately finds out you're his granddaughter, he'll be he'll be thrilled, and he won't want to come after you. But it's like, I think there's still a possibility of him being like, honestly, you're still a threat. Like, I don't know whether Celia really believes that, or whether it's a situation she's just figuring she can be able to manipulate Nancy. Like, obviously Nancy doesn't believe her on that front of, like, that's not why she did it. She did it to protect Ace, and Celia kind of was like, oh, you want a favor from me? That means you're going to do me a favor too. So it's like, you know, she didn't really have much choice in that matter, so. But because of the circumstances, you know, Grant and his mom are being relocated. So, you know, it's sad. Like, Ace just found out he's got a brother. Well, has known for a while, but just got to finally fully meet his brother, introductions and all. And now he has to say goodbye, you know. And he's like, you'll miss me? And he's like, nah, like, don't be ridiculous or whatever. I don't know. It's like, oh, yeah, that, like, oh, the grease being flavoring. He's like, yeah, you know, what does, it's like, oh, fryer grease powers cars or something like that. It's like, what does a salad power or whatever, you know? But also, Tom gets to meet his son, you know, for the first time, you know? And I thought it was kind of beautiful, him kind of signing his name, Grant, to Tom, and, you know, all three of them kind of being together like that. You know, for Grant, it's like he thought about this time and time again, meeting his dad, and it's better than kind of what he was expecting, you know? And I love the moment of like, yeah, Star Trek, better science and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, that's my brother. And they hug. And it's like, I really like that. That was pretty dope. I'm curious what Tom and Ace are going to do. Like, it's like, well, we both know this. Like, are we going to tell Mom? Because I'm sure Tom might feel like, well, I can't lie to your mom. Now that I know I have a son, like, I have to tell her the truth. Because that was also, like, a conversation between Grant and Nancy of, like, do I have the right to, like, reveal this? Because, like, I don't want to upheaval their family. Because it's like, what does that mean for them, for his family? What does that mean for Ace? But at the end of the day, Nancy's like, what do you want to do, So I think this was a necessary thing for everyone. What the ramifications will be for this, what complications this will bring about, I don't know. I'm interested to see. Like I said, I just assume Tom being who he is, he'll end up telling his wife the truth. But, we'll have to wait and see. Another aspect of this episode is Nick meeting with a source of Tiffany's who went quiet for a while, known as the Saint, but now they're back, willing to give even more physical evidence against Everett. So, Nick's kind of excited at that festival or whatever, and it's like, oh, I just gotta wear this red rose or whatever, and it's like, oh, turns out so many people have it, which obviously Nick was like, I don't get it, like, why hasn't the Saint come to me or whatever? So, but then he realizes like who it is, and it's like, it's someone he had met earlier. It's like, right, Tiffany knew that I got a scholarship at this particular school or whatever for football, and it's like, you were there as well. So you're connected to that school as well. So that's only something Tiffany would know. So it's like, you're the one. And it's like, right. It's like the reason why he didn't give Nick any information, because he didn't know if Nick was trustworthy, because Ryan introduced you as his friend. And Nick's like, why is that an issue? And then it turns out everything Everett's ever done, all the terrible stuff, the hits, the car bombs, all that, it turns out that Ryan's signature's on everything. And for Ryan, it's like, I was young and my dad and mom put stuff in front of me all the time saying like I didn't need to read it and just signed it, So now, like, Everett has framed him. Like, if Everett goes down for any of this stuff, it's not going to tie back to him. It's going to tie back to Ryan. And it's like, right. The sad thing is he spent so much of his life trying to impress his dad, and for this to be what his dad did, it's like, from a young age you were planning on screwing me over, but I guess, he has no family loyalty. That's why I'm like, regardless of anything, this kind of further proves, like, even if Nancy proves her loyalty, he's going to screw her over in some shape or form. He still might try and kill her, just because that's who Everett is. Once again, whether Celia really believes he'll give Nancy a shot, and it's like, oh, even suggesting like, oh, we should have more moments like this. I don't know whether she just really believes that, or whether she's just trying to use Nancy. But it's like his own son who's always been loyal to him, and it's like, oh, I've got your name on everything. I planned this, I had these contingencies set up way in advance. Like, that's so effed up, that he's been sitting on this for years. I guess it's like he can't necessarily get rid of them. It's like not much he can do, but it's kind of shitty on his part, because it's like, right, this is your own son, So we'll see on that front where things kind of go. Another angle to this episode is George trying to win that chowder situation, which I thought was pretty dope, because they lost their grandma's recipe, which I love the reveal at the end. Jesse's like, oh yeah, like that dude who got fired, Big Tony, is like, oh yeah, didn't he get fired for like stealing a whole bunch of clothes? It's like, yeah, also he stole grandma's recipe when he left. And it's like, what would she say, like, those hippie sons of bitches or something like that stole grandma's recipe? But it's like, at the end of the day, she ended up winning the competition. It's like, you were able to kind of figure it out on your own. I'm also surprised we got so little Odette this episode, because Jesse ended up bringing up the fact that I'm like, yeah, we've all met Odette, except for, like, I want to say it was like, ain't it like Ted believes it's just, she doesn't realize what's going on, that it's like a French ghost or whatever inside of George. She just thinks George just being weird and fun for the first time. So I thought that was interesting, because she was even like, wait, you've all met, so I thought that was kind of interesting. But also we had like the Bess thing, because Bess got the letter from Odette, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be weird. And she's writing a letter, and she kind of sneaks up behind George, and it's like, oh, I got your letter. And she's like, wait, what? I was like, oh, George, hey. And then obviously George is saying like, this is inappropriate, it's complicated, like not in more so in the sense of you're in love with a ghost, a centuries old ghost. I try to pluralize that while I was saying it. Couple centuries old ghost. that's possessing your friend's body. Complicated love story, but for Bess, it's also for her. It's like it fills the void. Like she's like, maybe on some level, I'm trying to fill the void of no Lisbeth or no Marvin's. Like that, it left a hole in her heart, or a void in her that maybe she's trying to fill. And George is kind of like, yeah, this is kind of a no. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, you kind of feel for Bess, because I think eventually it's going to be a situation where Odette's going to have to pass on. What those circumstances are necessarily going to look like, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But that's a complicated thing of like, oh yeah, this French ghost is inside of me. Yeah, she's super in love with one of my friends, but it's like I'm in a relationship and it's like complicated boundaries. It's a whole thing. So we'll see how that ultimately all ends up turning out. But another angle to this is at the end, Nancy fulfilling her side of things for Celia and tells the DA Rosario, who was played by Erica Serra. Once again, just a whole bunch of familiar faces. What was it? Right, she ended up kind of recanting her statement, saying like, I was confused, it was an emotional time, and the episode cuts there. That's going to suck, because for one, Nancy's reputation, she's not going to be a reliable witness and stuff like that. I'm sure the conversation is going to become like, did the Everetts threaten you? It's going to be complicated. I'm sure that's going to sour the relationship a little bit. Also with Nick, it's going to sour things, because he's like, how could you do this? Like, all that Everett's done, you're just going to let him get away. It's like, I didn't have any choice. I made a deal with Celia. It's like, how could you do that? Like, it's probably a thing of, why didn't you come to any of us for help? Why did you make this choice? It's like Ace was in trouble. Like, what was like? I'm sure that's going to be a big argument, because this is so important to Nick, you know, fulfilling Tiffany, his friend's wish of taking down the Hudson. So I'm sure sparks are going to fly next. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Nick will handle it. Maybe he'll be a little bit more understanding. But I think it's definitely going to be, I think, a complicated divide amongst the group. And I think it's going to make Ace feel even guilty, because any backlash against Nancy for doing this, he's going to feel responsible, because it's like, yes, she made that choice and sacrifice for me. So, like, how can I really be mad at her for it? I don't know. Like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what the fallout of this forced choice on Nancy, what the fallout to it ends up being. I'm really interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.